So I'm going to ask our speakers to just come up to the front. We do have about 15 minutes for a brief panel discussion. If folks have any specific questions that weren't addressed, please come up to the front and ask them in the microphone. And if there are no questions, then I'm going to lob questions at them off the top of my head. And we did lose Luis. He had something he had to take care of. And of course, Jenna was unable to make it. So it's a bit of a smaller panel than we were hoping for, but we're happy to take any questions if anybody wants to kick things off.
And I'm really good at addressing elephants in the room. So, Ben, here goes. Why the hell don't we just kill the bass? Why do they have to go back in the lake? I don't get it. Thanks.
That's a big question. It's been asked more than once to me. That's at a higher level. First things first, I think the feasibility of actually removing all the bass out of the lake would be pretty big feat to try to accomplish. Okay, so that's a difference. So under tournaments, that would have to go through a Fish and Game Commission, like I believe, like a rule to be able to overturn that, because that's actually a sport. Those are sport fish tournaments. Those aren't catch and keep tournaments. In order to have those tournaments, it's a catch and release fishery. It was brought up, a person from the public came up to me earlier and asked the same question about why don't these guys, bass fishing is generally a catch and release fishery. Those guys have the option to actually keep fish on their own on non-tournament days. If they want to keep, they're allowed to keep 5 fish over 12 inches in Clear Lake. But the bass angling community is really, as probably most of you guys know, is a very catch and release oriented. To have a tournament, they're not going to probably want to kill their resources and pay to go kill the resources. I mean, these guys are going out catching the biggest bags that they can, and releasing them back so they can try to catch them again and have future opportunities to catch these sport fish. There is a probably opportunity to have that option, but I definitely don't see it ever happening because the anglers aren't going to be participated in that. They're all about, they get angry at people that just go out there and catch fish, catch bass and take them home, even though it's perfectly legal. They're not wasting them. But the catch and release is huge in the bass community. So that's why I don't see that ever happening. I mean, they're not going to probably enter tournaments to kill their own sport fishery. You know, I don't see that ever happening. Again, especially if they have the opportunity on their own time, especially a lot of them pre-fish, they're completely legal if they want to keep and catch fish, but none of them, I mean, I'm not going to say none of them, but most of them, unless they maybe deep hook and like wound them, they're going to release those fish so they can try to catch them at, they get bigger and catch them at a later date.
Okay, one other question.
If I could add about bass fishing, we don't fully understand the impacts of the bass fishery. So before taking a step like that, at least in my mind, I'd want to have more information, some diet studies, and really see what the impact is. We have a better understanding of carp, and in that would be the carp management has multiple benefits, whereas eradicating a population of bass just straight through tournaments, again, may not have an effect on the bass population, and we're unsure if it would have an effect on the hitch population, whereas the relationship between the presence of carp is more clear.
Yep. Yeah, totally got that. Yeah, just...
Can I jump on the bass thing?
And I have one other follow-up question, because I want to know who gets to run the tournaments. Can anyone run a sports tournament?
You can file a permit and hold a tournament. Yes.
Okay, so I could conceivably hold a bass tournament, And it wouldn't be catch and release? I could do that?
No, it has to be catch. Right? They're not catch and keep, not for bass tournaments. That's one of the stipulations.
And that's back to the commission ruling.
Yeah, it's in our code.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. There's I mean, the tournaments offer big fish awards, but again, it goes back to they have to release the fish. But yes, there's big fish and then total bag limit. So 25 pounds, 30 pounds for a 5 fish bag limit is pretty good at Clear Lake, and regularly you see 10 to 12 pound bass caught.
Yeah. So just to follow up and moderate. Okay, let me moderate first. So I appreciate the passion. I was there a year ago. I got to slow my own roll, and I'm the policy guy. So I do want to state we do understand and appreciate how central sport fishing is to Lake County's economy. That said, somewhere between extermination by terminate, what type of outreach and education, though? Because I know that they would not intuitively want to catch and release, but how much education is there available? I do think there is an opportunity, because I do take opportunities myself to talk to sports fishermen. They probably feel like they're good stewards of the fishery in doing the catch and release. But if they were educated about the special case that Clear Lake is, by far one of the most prominent bass fisheries in the country, if it's under environmental stress, it's not just about the hitch at that point, it is about the bass and other sport fish. So is there any middle ground, any bridge building that can occur to at least start those conversations before we even start pitching things to Fish and Game Commission? Is it just a bridge too far that bass fishing is bass fishing what it is all across the country, and we can't touch that third rail? Or is there some bridges that we can either start to build locally or through our partner agencies like CDFW to start that dialogue? Because I do think through these various talks, there are many extremes of opinions. My own opinions have not been well informed, but what can we do to better inform my opinions as a policymaker and to start bridging the gap with our sport fishing friends? They're friends.
I was going to let Matt speak, because if you want to speak on this subject or talk about what you were going to speak about earlier.
I'll skip kind of what I was going to say earlier, but I think that it gets to some of what Felipe just mentioned, in that there are in any scenario there are often unintended consequences, right? So when you talk about biocontrol that has ramifications beyond immediate known responses, I think that one of the things that's increasingly clear from certainly the surveys that we do, USGS does, and some of the work that everyone else is doing, CDFW, tribal partners, showing that there are broader issues in the lake that are affecting all of the species. So we see booms and busts in hitch recruitment and recruitment success. There's similar evidence for booms and busts and recruitment success for bass and for other species that have we'll say other interested parties. And so I think that's the common ground, right? There's this clear signal that the ecosystem is not functioning for many of the constituents that we care about, both the native fishes that have massive cultural and local significance and intrinsic biological significance, and then also for sport fishing elements. The ecosystem is not working for either currently.
Well said, Matt. Any other questions from the audience? Sarah, come on up.
Well, my earlier question was answered by 4 separate panels, so thank you for that very elaborate answer. Bass fishermen, I understand the numbers are going down. If you wait 25 years, they'll probably age out. And then a wild question, why not just replace the bridge with a suspension bridge?
I don't think there are any engineers up here that could speak to the feasibility of a suspension bridge, but we do appreciate creative solutions.
Hello. I had a question about water quality and fish. And given the fact there's some data on, or some studies on cyanotoxins impacting the health of wildlife and waterfowl and fish, just wondering, is CDFW or anybody working on looking at that? I mean, we know there's cyanotoxins in the tissue of fish. We have study of multiple fish over the years, and we've got some more data that continues to show there's cyanotoxins in the fish itself, multiple species, fish and shellfish. So given the fact that the species seem to be declining in the lake, I mean, I think it seems to me like it would be worth looking at, really the state of California coming up with a number. There is a fish consumption number that the state has come up with of 10 nanograms per gram for sports fish consumption. But in terms of the actual health of the fish, it seems like it would be worth spending some time on that. I know that CDFW now has a HABs coordinator, which is fantastic. And so I hope that, Karen and her Department of One will be able to continue to work on that. But just wanted to see if there's any comments you had about that information. Thanks.
Yeah, and I will speak for our HABs coordinator that she has expressed interest in starting a study. Unfortunately, it hasn't gone beyond the kind of spitballing stage, the initial conversations. It is an unknown. I did kind of a cursory literature search on impacts to cyprinids specifically. They seem to be pretty resilient, but again, we don't know specifics for Clear Lake Hitch. It would require, a study for us to make an informed decision. But I think we know that HABs are a problem. And I don't think we need more motivation to seek solutions for that. I think better understanding how microcystins and other toxins affect Hitch would be informative. But I don't think we need to wait for that study. And I know you do a lot of great work in the microcystis monitoring, and it is a problem that we do need to address with the Clear Lake. And the water quality within the lake is a massive issue as far as dissolved oxygen and harmful algal blooms. So absent any studies, I think there's impacts that we do need to address. And again, this speaks to the ecological function, bringing some balance back to the food web and the nutrient cycling to really reduce the harmful algal blooms and thereby benefit all the species in the lake and the people that use the lake.
And I think an important, that touches on something that's related and expansive. I mean, there are many things tied to water quality that lead to sublethal effects. It's really easy to see a dramatic fish kill due to low dissolved oxygen, and that's a very strong, immediate lethal impact. There are sublethal effects from things like cyanotoxins or potentially mercury or moderate dissolved oxygen that could potentially impair some elements of movement and behavior, but wouldn't necessarily result in death, right? And so understanding more broadly how the different sublethal effects contribute to either reproductive success or some other element of distribution would be really valuable.
Regarding the question of catch and release versus catch and keep, if you were to keep the bass, you would also be lowering the mercury level. As we learned yesterday, the bass have one of the highest contents of that. I also want to ask a question about that I didn't get to ask yesterday. Maybe you guys know, is regarding the mercury levels in plants, in any of the water plants or even the marsh plants like carex and even the tules themselves. Do you know if they capture the mercury so that you might be able to harvest when the wetlands are dry and be harvesting and removing the mercury in that fashion also?
I like going out on limbs, so I'll attempt to answer that. But just bearing in mind that I'm not a plant biologist and toxicology isn't my strong suit. But I do recall some conversations early on in my involvement with the former water manager from Robinson Rancheria, Corolla Kennedy, and her expressing concerns on native plants that are used for basket weaving. And she was really concerned with the basket weavers being exposed to mercury through native plant pathways. Again, I'm not an expert on this. This is just kind of secondhand information that I've had through conversations, but it does warrant further investigations, really understanding how mercury is traveling through the food web, and then also the sublethal effects, like I mentioned during my talk, how they're additive. So while mercury may not be directly lethal, methyl mercury may not be directly lethal in the levels that we're seeing in the fish, it definitely does have some consequences as far as reproductive success and reducing their overall success.
This is a question for Ben. That Manning fish ladder that you guys put in looked really great. But I noticed from the pictures, is that a crossing? Like vehicles can actually drive through the water?
There was two of them I did, but both of them were used for agricultural crossings. Though both of those Manning examples they used them as for tractors, but those weren't both those crossings weren't got heavy public usage. They were on private property and they used them as tractors. The Kendall Jackson one used to mow their field for fire control, and then the other one was just to access their vineyard.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious about any more of the in-stream vehicle crossings like that, and if there are any sort of parameters around spawning season restrictions.
Well, I think both those examples were put in a long time ago. I couldn't tell you when those crossings were put in, but I'm sure those aren't the only two in the Clear Lake watershed. So again, that's why I was saying out of their good hearts, because really they didn't have to let us know. If you guys know or you come across any of these historic barriers, and we're willing to work with these landowners. I think a lot of them are intimidated about letting us know they have a possible barrier, but we try to work with them, work through the permit process, and we try to make it as easy for them, because otherwise we really don't have the power to be able to just go in there and just do it ourselves. They let us know, gave us access to come in and do our work.
I will also add that Bureau of Land Management has put in place a wet weather closure for Cow Mountain. I know it's a really popular off-roading area, and they are taking some actions, are looking into redesigning the entry so that folks cannot drive across Scotts Creek right there at the entrance to Cow Mountain, and do in fact close the area when it's wet, when water's flowing through there. And actually we got some panicked emails this spring because of fencing going up in that area, and people were concerned that it would be a barrier for Hitch, but it turned out to be Bureau of Land Management putting up fencing to prevent off-road vehicles from entering that area. So these are small steps in the right direction, but we do want to look for other opportunities like this. And, if we know private landowners that have these, again, this is my crowdsourcing. I rely on the community that if we do know barriers like this, road crossings, problem areas, let us know, contact us, tell Sarah, tell me, tell Ben, and we'll see what we can do. We have a lot of tools in our toolbox, and we're adding to that toolbox constantly.
Captive audience, can you speak to the public trust doctrine? People don't know a lot about it. It's in the Fish and Game Code, but it's kind of interesting because you're right. Private property owners might go, "Ooh, there's something scary in my stream. If I tell anybody about it, I'm going to get dinged." But then we have a large structure like the Main Street Bridge where we have clear blockages, but we need landowner approval basically to get the public trust doctrine to be enforced. Sonoma County is a very interesting example because they have I forget what they call it, but a public trust resource map that they had to develop at the far end of a lawsuit or two. But I'm just wondering, how do you, one, can you explain what the public trust doctrine is that is in the Fish and Game Code? And then how do we as policymakers try to educate / enforce that as we are navigating these various blockages and things in our waterways? And if you are familiar with the Sonoma County model, has any usefulness come out of that public resource mapping?
The short answer is it's complicated. And like I said, it's a complicated regulatory landscape that we exist in. I know you're well aware of that. I'm not in a position where I could speak a lot about the public trust doctrine other than, we have a lot of good faith actors that are working on Clear Lake Hitch conservation. And I think I have to just leave it at that.
I'm not an attorney, but we did have somebody look into that, and there are other avenues that are preferred to take before you use that, and I think that is reserved for more. You want to be careful when you pull that one out.
Chris, we'll give you the last word.
I'm the last. Good evening, gentlemen. I appreciate all of the hard work that you guys all put into this science symposium and all your daily jobs. Please, thank you very much for all of that. I have a question. I know that sometimes probably you guys come across some red tape or, barriers or something like, if I could just legally do this, what would that look like for you guys if the Clear Lake Hitch was federally listed as an endangered species? What would it look like for you in a positive manner that could help you complete your job or get past that one little step, or maybe more funding to expand? What would be something that each of you could gain from the Clear Lake Hitch being federally listed? If you don't mind starting with Anthony.
So I think one thing, and this has been somewhat alleviated with the state, they've had a lot more funding recently, and there has been more funding that's come to the Hitch. But in general, if there are a lot of funding programs that are limited to endangered species, and so having an endangered species, having the Hitch listed would increase the availability of funding, or would make it more competitive on funding opportunities that are highly salmon focused.
Yeah, like Anthony said, I think there's probably some more funding issues, or some funding opportunities, I should say. I think some concerns that I'm speaking for myself and just working with Lake County residents, and just doing the barrier work that we've done on private properties. I hope it doesn't scare people from working with us, or if they find Hitch, that there might be more reluctant to try to working with us and open us because of maybe more restrictions that they might be afraid of, whether valid or not. I do think, from what I've seen, especially in the last how much it's ramped up in the last 2 to 3 years, with how much work is being done to help this fish, how much monitoring and actually on the ground work to actually try to get this fish back on its feet is really phenomenal. I mean, I follow the Fish and Game Commissions just to keep an eye on what's going around the state on various other species, and obviously I'm biased for the Hitch, but the amount of work and time that this community is doing is just is really good. I have to be careful what I say too, because I think anything to help protect the Hitch is good, but also I also think there could be there might be too much, in the sense that it might scare away a lot of people that want to help the fish, but might be more reluctant to open up and let us know, hey, we see Hitch in our creek right here, even though, once we go in and try to do the work, I mean, the people that we've worked with to do the barrier removal on the private property, I can't speak for them now, they're not in here, but if I were to guess, I think they would say that working with CDFW and the tribes, because the tribes have come out on some of the property to give their take on it, I think I would put money that had a good positive relationship with us. They were glad to work with us through the process, and I want to keep that going, because I think that's what we got to keep the community we're all in this together and trying to work together, and that it's not just some iron fist. We're trying to get on properties and we're going to tell you all these permits and fees. We have, I think, in order to get further towards our goals, we got to keep working with these people. And but I'm hesitant because I'm not going to speak for the feds and stuff. But just my concerns that there is a lot of good work doing. I don't know how much, but like Anthony touched on, I think there's going to be more funding opportunities. I just hope the public continues because I think we're heading in the right direction. When we worked with Kendall Jackson, they were trying to work with the other private landowners out there too, to let them know. I said, hey, if you could just let them know, don't have them be afraid of us. If they see Hitch on their property, if there's barriers, keep spreading the word. So I want to keep that going because I think we're headed in the right direction on that.
Can I give you a quick, easy answer and then a naive, optimistic answer? Funding, right? I mean, so we are at the U.S. Geological Survey. We're also in the Department of Interior, so we're a sister agency to Fish and Wildlife. And so that we work closely with them for informing their listing decisions and all of the critical habitat designations that might follow, those sorts of things. I think that in the scenario you laid out, the regulatory framework gets that much more complicated for everybody as more agencies have direct fingers in the pie. It's a terrible metaphor, sorry. But I think that there's, as Ben was talking about, and as Felipe has exemplified with the task force, hopefully there's this framework where there's local entities working in partnership with the regulatory agencies, and everybody will have a fairly good stake at the table, and it'll move forward fairly smoothly. And I naively think that the structure is in place for that to happen. I'm crossing all my fingers, but we'll see.
Yeah, and I guess I have to preface this with my goal is delisting. That is literally my job function, is to get species to a point where we can delist them. What positives, to speak directly to your question, obviously resources and staff. Matt also touched on, and Ben also touched on, that there would be an increased layer of regulation that we do need to consider. However, within the task force, we do have Fish and Wildlife Services, an active member. They're at the meetings, they're working with us. They've been good partners. So I am optimistic that we can put together a structure. The task force was originally formed as an emergency response, and my goal in the next year or so is to build the infrastructure so that if I get struck by lightning or abducted by aliens or whatever, that it can keep going with making the great progress that we've been making. I think the partnerships that we forged and the relationship that we forged with your leadership, with Sarah's leadership, have been really beneficial. So optimistically, if they do get federally listed, the service would continue to be good partners. We have those open lines of communication, and that we'd be able to navigate any additional regulatory layers with their help. But again, can't speak for the feds. I'm a state agency. Ultimately, my goal is to get these fish delisted to a point where they no longer need our protections. Lofty goal. But that's what I'm working towards, and I think we're making some great steps in that direction. Right. I want to thank everybody who stuck around, and I know Angela De Palma's not here, but watching her run around with the microphone, I hope she gets a good nap after this. I want to thank our panelists, Robinson Rancheria for hosting us, and hope to see you all at Sopa Reese tonight. One more thing. The doors open at 6. We'll see you there soon. Thank you all.